So yesterday we discussed about Code Gen, that is the Playwright's tool, which comes with the Playwright installation, and it can auto-generate the test scripts. It has support for multiple languages, multiple browsers. It can record the scripts. You can use it for inspecting the elements, asserting the visibility, asserting the value or the text which is present in an element. Now, we will talk about today how to use Playwright to actually go ahead and test some user interface. So in order to do this, we have a small process that we will follow. One, we create a folder and we switch to that particular folder using command prompt. And then we go ahead and create a new Playwright project using the command line interface. So if you remember yesterday, we have downloaded and installed Node.js and the Playwright. So using the Node package manager, we create a new Playwright project. The command that you see on screen allows me to create a new Playwright test project. Once I have the project, I can open it using any code editor. My code editor that I'm going to use is Visual Studio Code, and then we can create new test inside the tests folder. So we can go to the tests folder and create any test that we need, and then we can run those tests using the npx command. So you can say npx playwright test, which runs the test in the default browser. You can also specify in which browser you want to run the test. So you can say project equals Chromium if you want to run it in Chrome browser. We can also open the trace viewer of Playwright and see the test getting executed. And we can also go ahead and see all the requests that are being processed, and we can go ahead and see at what point my test failed. All of this, I can do it with the help of trace viewer, which comes with Playwright. So now let's go ahead and write a simple Playwright test and execute it. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the virtual machine that I created earlier. So I'm just going to go back to the VM. Where is it? Here. I hope you also downloaded the virtual machine. Did you download the virtual machine yesterday?
I think so.
Okay. I want you to do this alongside with me. So can you confirm if you have downloaded the virtual machine? I can show you how to open that virtual machine using Playwright, and you can do it alongside me.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm going to stop my screen share. Just go ahead and check if you have the virtual machine.
I think so. I have one. It's decisions-001.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Can you show me that
Oh,
VM
sure.
that you have?
Sure. Maybe I can. Yes.
Yes, this time you have the virtual machine as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and set this up using the tool that we discussed earlier, Hyper-V. Or do you prefer to do it locally on your system?
I think I'll
Just
just
wanted
do
to
it locally.
You'll do it locally? Okay, then
Yeah.
fine. In that case, it's fine. If you'll do it locally, that's fine. All right, let me go back to my screen share. Okay, so now I'm gonna go ahead and bring that VM so that we can do this parallelly. So can you see the virtual machine?
Yes.
Okay. So first things first, we're gonna go ahead and create one folder. I'm on my desktop, I'll create one folder. But before that, we need a project to test. Let's say I want to go ahead and test out, um, just for the sake of demo, I just want to test out decisions.com. This is what I want to test. Okay. So in order to do this, first thing that I'll do is I'll bring in the command prompt. So I'll say CMD, and then we'll open the Playwright code gen. Do you remember the command to open Playwright code gen?
No.
npx Playwright code gen. Okay, this is the command which opens the code gen. So now the code gen is open. I can go ahead and write a simple test here. Say decisions.com. Just visiting decisions.com. And now I want to make sure that this is the text which is available on the website. So I can go ahead and do a text assertion here. So I can select that and then choose this text and say, okay. So now I have my test ready. I'll stop the recording. So my test is now ready. It is simply going to decisions.com and it is making sure that inside an H1, there is a text called as automate anything, change everything. If this text is present, that indicates my test is passed. Because if you remember from the yesterday's session, the expect is a matcher that is used for asserting the test in React and Angular applications. So this is what is going to do an assertion for me. All right. So now that my test script is ready, I need to go ahead and run it and then verify whether it is giving me the correct result or not. So to do that, I'll create one folder somewhere on my desktop here. Say Playwright demo test, or just demo is sufficient. Then in this folder, I'm going to open the command prompt. So I'll just go ahead and type in CMD, and then we'll say npm init playwright @latest. Are you following along with me?
Yes.
Okay. So the command is npm init playwright @latest and hit enter. It's asking me what is the language that you want to choose. So I'm going to use TypeScript as the language. So I'll select TypeScript. Now it's asking me, where do you want to store the test? I want the test to be stored inside a folder whose name is tests. So I'll just press enter. It's asking next, do you want GitHub Actions? I don't want GitHub Actions, so by default it is false. So I'll press enter again. Next, it's asking, do we want to install the Playwright browser drivers, which we have already done yesterday. So I'm going to go ahead and select N for this. Now it's creating the project for me. So the project is successfully created. If you see this folder, I have a bunch of files and folders created in it. That is my Playwright project. Are you able to do this?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I want to open this folder in a code editor so that I can work with. I have already downloaded Visual Studio Code, but you can choose any code editor. Do you know how to download Visual Studio Code?
Yes, I have it.
Okay, then I'm gonna go ahead and open Visual Studio Code and I'll open that folder. So we'll go to File, Open Folder. Wow. Are you able to see my screen?
I can see that part. It got really big, but
Yeah.
I can see the part that you're working on right now.
Okay. Yeah, this form got really big, and I can select the folder from here, Playwright demo, and say select. There it is. Yes, I trust my own projects. Okay. Next, let's talk about this project structure. So first thing here, we have a file called as package.json. Package.json is a file that is added to Node.js applications, which contains a record of all the different packages the application is using. So here, this application is using a few npm packages. The list of those packages are there. It also has the name of the project and the version and other things. Then there is package lock.json, which basically contains information about exactly which version of the packages are installed onto the current project. So it lists out all of them in this file. Then there is git ignore. This is related to GitHub, which is a version control. If we want to send this project to a version control system, then if we want to ignore some files, we list them out in this file. Next, we have this important folder called as node_module, which actually stores all the modules which are downloaded. So whatever modules that are mentioned by the packages and package lock.json, it's going to download and keep it over here in this folder. These modules can be auto-generated once again by executing a command called as npm install. So if I have to move this project from this system to another system, I can simply delete node modules folder. Next, we have a test example folder, which contains some example tests so that you can refer this and create your own test scripts. So these are examples that gets created as part of this project. Then there is another folder called as tests, which actually contains the test that you are going to write. So once again, here also there is one simple example that was given. Again, I don't need this template. I'm going to go ahead and delete everything from it. So far, so good. We now have nothing in this file. Example.spec.ts is the file name. I can change it to whatever name I want. I'll just go ahead and change it. Say main.spec.ts, something like this. Next, we also have one file called as playwright.config.ts. This contains the configuration of the Playwright. Like, it contains information about where are the tests present, what are the different drivers this particular test is going to use for different browsers. All of that information is part of this configuration file. What is the HTML report? What is the report that this particular test is going to generate, and in which format that report is generated? That's also mentioned in this configuration file. You don't have to make any changes to it. I'm just letting you know what is present in this file. Any questions?
No.
Okay. Now, I have this test script that I have generated, this one. I want to use this particular test script. So I can just go ahead and copy it as it is from here. Whatever is present in this one, copy this and paste it here. I can change my test title. So Jasmine is a test framework that is used usually with JavaScript application, and it allows you to create a test suite. And here we are creating one test as part of that. This is the title of the test. This title will appear in the reports. So when you run the test, this particular title will appear. I won't change it. Say test decisions application, like this. So now that I have a test, I want to go ahead and run this particular test and see the results. In order to do that, I can go back to the command prompt, and from the command prompt, we'll execute a command here, npx playwright test. Now this will go ahead and run the test in the different browser drivers that I have installed. If I want to run it in a specific browser, I can say project equals to Chromium, like this, which basically runs it on the desktop Chrome browser. And we hit enter. Done. My test is executed. It's showing that there was one test which has passed successfully. I can also see a test report which was generated. It's an HTML report. I can say npx playwright show-report, which will go ahead and show me a report. So there is my test report and the name of my test and what are the things that were executed as part of my test. If there are more than one test, all of it, it's going to list out. Plus, it will also tell me in which browser this test was executed. Like here, it's Chromium browser. I can also go ahead and see what tests passed and what tests failed, which ones are skipped, which one was flaky, that is when Playwright was trying. Yeah, all of this it's going to report. Now, I can also use something called as a trace viewer. So in order to use the trace viewer, let me close this by pressing Control-C here and say Y. Did you follow along till here?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So let's say I want to go ahead and see the trace viewer. And in order to do that, I can simply go ahead and say -UI. That basically opens the Playwright trace viewer and I can see my test getting executed and I can see what are the lines that are getting executed, what is the state of my test at each one of these lines. So let me run it. So now there is the trace viewer. Let's go ahead and adjust it. You can see there is one test suite called as main. It has one test with the name is test decisions application. Now I can go ahead and click on run to run this test. If I want to run all of them, then there is a separate run all button. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this run. You should be able to see this test getting executed in real time here. See? Are you able to follow and understand? And it's also telling me whether the test has passed or failed. I can click on any one of these to see what is the state of my test during the execution of these different lines, the number of requests that were sent, all of it is being displayed over here. You have the logs that you get usually in the browser. So the browser logs, the network logs, the console, all of it will be displayed here in this trace viewer. Any questions?
No.
Okay. So far so good. We are able to write a test. Now, if I want to write multiple tests in this same file, then it's going to be very difficult to maintain this file. So a good practice is to move this test, whatever code that I have for the test, to a separate file and then call that particular test here. Okay. So to do that, I will go ahead and in this folder, create a file. It's a new file. I'll give it a name, say decisions home page. Actually, lowercase, I'll use decisions home page test.ts. The TypeScript files will have the extension .ts. TypeScript is a programming language. It's a superset of JavaScript. So now these two lines that I have over here, I'm going to cut it from here and I'll create one function here. I'll say export async function name, say decisions home page test. And then we will go ahead and take one parameter called as page. Then we open the function body and close it. And there we paste this code. Are you following along?
Yes.
Okay. Now, here there is one error that it is giving saying that expect is could not be found. So I can fix this by adding an import statement. Say import, say expect small letters from playwright/test. So playwright/test, it's a library. From there, I'm importing this element called as expect so that I can use it in my test. So far, so good. We have created one function here. The name of the function is decisions home page test. This is an asynchronous function and it can also be exported. Exported means just like the way I have imported this expect from a different library, I can import this function in a different place. Like this file, I can import that function here. So I can write this line, say import decisions homepage test from decisions homepage test file. This is the file name and it does not have any extension here. Now I need to call that function. So I'll say await. Since it is an asynchronous function, we have to call it using await. Always remember async and await keyword, they're used together. You create a function using async and you invoke it using await. So if we see this function, I created it using async. I'm going to invoke it using await. So here I'll say decisions homepage test and pass in this variable that I have here, which is the playwright page object. All set. Now I can save it and go ahead and run this particular test. So once again, let me quit this, terminate. Let's run. I'm just gonna run it just like that. So it's trying to run in Firefox. It's gonna fail. Okay. So out of these, it is failing for the WebKit browser because I don't have that. Whereas for Chromium and Firefox, it's basically passing this particular test. Since I didn't give any browser, it's using the all three browser drivers, but I can specify which one to run it. Any questions?
Let me see.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, no, I'm good.
Good. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So far, so good. We are able to write the test. We can write our test independently in separate files like this one, and then we can go ahead and use them in our main test file. Let's say I want to write one more test. So let's go back to the inspector, clear everything. Let's say I want to test Google. So I'll say google.com. This is one more test that I'm writing, and it's not recording. I forgot to record. So let me click on the record button and then type in again google.com and hit enter. So it's recording that we are on the Google's home page. Now, once again, this is my test script that I want to run. So I'll copy this line of code that I have. It's just one line. And I'll go back to my project. In the test folder, I'll create a new file. I'll give it a name, say Google page test.ts, not ts. And now here, again, I can create a function, say export async function, say Google test. This is the name. Function takes one parameter, page, and it does this. Just one line of code for now. If I want to go ahead and do some assertions, I can say import expect from @playwright/test. I can do some assertions. For example, if you go to Google, here in the browser title, you can see there is a title over here called as Google dot, right? There's a title. I want to make sure that I have the correct title when I visit this page. So there is a method that I can use. So if I want to create a variable, I can say let, say title equals to 08 page dot title. So I'm just calling a function here called as page.title that I can use. There are multiple ways I can go ahead and do this assertion. So let's use this one. Say, await, expect title to be, I'm going to expect it to be the value Google. So whatever I get back from this title, I'm saying that it should be Google. Then only my test is considered as passed. Are you following along?
I'm not doing this one, but yes, it all makes sense.
Okay. So far so good. We are able to write one more test, but again, it's not part of our test suite. So here we'll go ahead and add a test here. Say Google test, some name like this, comma, async. Now here also I'm creating a function, but this function does not have any name. It's called as an anonymous function or arrow function. One of these two you can call it. So then like this. Now inside this function, we want to make a call to this function we created called as Google test. So I'll have to first import it. So I'll say import Google test. Now I can say await Google test and pass in the page object like this. And I'm missing one bracket. That's it. All set. Let's run it. So back here, let's quit this. Yes. Let's rerun. And I want to run it in the UI. So I'll just open that. Let's run. So Google test has been completed successfully. It passed. whereas the decisions ones is still executing and it also passed. So both of my tests has passed successfully. I can see it here. Any questions?
No.
Okay. Now let's talk about how we can test decisions application. Now that we understand how the Playwright works, we will now go ahead and take a look at how to do this in decisions. Okay, so let's go to a browser and let's open decisions. So here's what I have created for the IST team yesterday for the Playwright. So there is a form that I have created here called as full name form that takes the first name and last name in two text boxes. And there is a show full name button. It's a very simple form with two controls for first name and last name and a button. I also have one end form that I have created here. Not this one, actually. Where is the end form gone? Okay, I'll show it. So let's go to this flow. So in the flow, I'm first showing this first name and last name form. And then I have an end form here. If I click on edit, you should be able to see the end form. So this end form has one label. That label is taking this input called as full name, and it is simply displaying that full name. All right. Any
Okay.
questions related to this project as of now?
No.
Okay. So far, so good. And in this end form, I have done this merge plain text for the input so that I can combine the first name and last name together. So let's just quickly run this and see what we get as the output. So here's my form. I'm going to go ahead and give my first name Khalil and my last name Syed and say show. Okay, that end form didn't appear, I believe. I should go ahead and do a regular run. Run flow. Say Khalil, Syed, say show full name. There is my end form, right? That's giving me my output. Now I want to record this particular test. In order for me to record this particular test, what I did is I went ahead and exported or exposed this particular flow as a user interface because I just want to test out this flow. I don't want to test out everything like first login and then execute this, right? I don't want to test out all of that process. So I'm integrating this as a user interface. And when you click on view, we get a URL for this. Here, I have also given all users permission for using this particular flow. So there is all users can use permission that I have given. Now I can go ahead and choose maybe any of the sessions here, say this session, and this is the URL now to access that flow. So if I go ahead and open an incognito mode and paste this URL, we can see the form here, say leave and say Syed and say show full name, and I have my full name displayed here. Yesterday we did face some problem like this button was not visible for some of these developers. So we made a small change. We changed its location to be center so that we can see it in the center of the screen, the form. So here now it appears in the center of the screen, and then we go ahead and test it. And we have our output. Okay. Any questions?
I don't think so.
Okay. Now I want to go ahead and record this. Okay. So in order to record this, I have Playwright inspector, which is already running here. Let me go to the browser and create a new tab, get rid of this. clear everything. Okay, so there is my browser. I'm going to paste that URL here and hit enter. Okay. Next, we go ahead and fill out the values of these text boxes. Now, if you have done, let's say, some automation testing using decisions, or if you have done maybe, say, styling for the forms or something, then you know that the IDs of these controls is randomly generated in decisions. Have you come across that scenario?
No.
Okay, so each of these controls basically they needs to be retrieved using some form of locator. One of the locators is ID locator. And then there are other locators like CSS, XPath, and so on. Now, these locators are basically are the one which allows you to find these elements on a web page so that uh, tools like Playwright can interact with those elements. And these IDs are the ones which are most commonly used. Let me just bring in the developer tools and show you that. So if I just go here and put my cursor on this, see, there is an ID that is there for this control. It is random value. Every time I run this form, it's going to be different for this particular control. So in order for me to go ahead and have the proper test scripts, what I did is I took advantage of an HTML5 element, which is label for. So in my form, I made this change. So if you go here to this label, I'm setting over here what is the text box it is associated with. Like this label is associated with the text box this, and this label is associated with the text box this one. Are you able to understand?
Yes.
Now when I go to Playwright and try to go ahead and record this and put my cursor over this, see, Playwright is fetching this element based on the label.
Hmm.
Again, if I put my cursor over this, it's fetching based on the label. But in case if I remove this, for the sake of the demo, I'm gonna go ahead and remove for, or let me add one more label and text box. So there is one label, there's one text box, one more label, and one more text box I'm adding, okay? Let me just go ahead and give some names, test and test. But I'm not gonna go ahead and select label for these two and save it. Let's go back and try to access that same URL again. Now, if I try to access this, see, text box nth of 2, and this is text box nth of 3 it's using. It becomes very difficult to read my scripts based on this. If I have to read my script at some point of time, then I don't know what is nth of 3 is storing. Maybe it's a text box for name, maybe it's a text box for age, maybe it's a text box for address. We don't know that, right? So reading my scripts becomes a difficult job, as well as creating these scripts is also very difficult if I do not take help of this option, label for.
How do you access label for?
You go to a label, and then in the properties, you can select with which text box or control this label is assigned to.
Okay.
Okay,
Yes, thank you.
you're welcome. All right, so far so good. We now have a form. Let's go ahead and generate the scripts for it. So there is a lot of things here. Let me clear it out. Okay. Let's fill in the first name, say Khalil, and let's fill in the last name, Syed and say show full name. Oh, there's a validation there. Okay. I should have removed these. Let me just get rid of these. Save it. Clear out everything. Go back. Paste the URL. Now I'll give my name, Syed, and click on show full name here. And as you can see, it's saying get this particular control by label. Click on it. Get this control by label. Fill this value. Again, press tab because I did press a tab when my cursor was in this text box. And then it's going ahead and filling the next one. Now I'm going to click this button. See, it's going ahead and recording that click option. See, there it is. Recording the click option. And this got recorded twice. We can get rid of it. Now, last thing, I want to do the assertion for this one. So I can go ahead and say I want to assert some text, that is this one. And select this. There is now an assertion as well in my script. Are you able to follow and understand?
I am not able to do everything that you just did,
Okay.
but I am mostly following along.
Do you need any help in understanding this?
No, I understand. It's just since I didn't
Mhm.
already have the form set up, I'm a little bit
Okay.
behind. But I think I think
Do you need few minutes to try it out?
um no, let's keep moving and then I'll go back and look at the video once you post it.
Okay. Sure. Then fine.
Um I think. Yeah. Yeah. So that way we can
Okay, makes sense.
yeah.
Makes sense. So I'm going to go ahead and copy all of this script from here like this. And I'll go back to my project and create one more new test file. So here I'll say full name form test.ts. And then we'll create one function, say export async function. We'll give it a name, say name test. This is the function name. There will be a parameter called as age and the function body. We paste the rest of the code here. And it's using page one. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that page one. Oops. Come on. Here we go. Remove it and remove this. We do need to add an import statement. So we'll say import expect from playwright/test. Also, there are a few unnecessary things here. There are multiple clicks onto this. I don't need this second click here, so I can get rid of this. I don't even need this click. I can again get rid of that. There are multiple URLs that are added over here. So I'm going to go ahead and change this URL with the one that I have copied. Oops. Here in decisions integration page, I'm going to copy that URL and paste it here. And REST 3, I don't need it. I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of it. When you navigate from one page to another, it's recording the URL of the different page. So we don't need that. I'll just get rid of that. Okay, so we now have a functional test for decisions form. Now I want to go ahead and run this particular test. Once again, we go back to the command prompt and we can execute the same command. And from the trace viewer, oh, my test is not showing up. Do you know why?
No.
Okay. So if you see here, I created my test function, but I never called it from a test. See, I don't have an actual test. I have a function, but I don't have an actual test. So we will create one test. We'll say test, name the test, say full name test, and then we'll say async page and arrow function and 2 flower braces like this and hit enter. Now I need to go ahead and import it. Say import, say full name. What was that function that I gave? Name test. So we'll say import name test. And now I can say await name test, pass in the page. So far, so good. We now have 3 different tests here. If I go back here, you can see the test is now appearing. You can run it. Now the decisions test has failed. If you see here, it has failed. See, and this is the line that failed. To contain text. And this is the one that is basically failing for my test. But the problem is because of this particular end form, it's taking some time to load. And since this is a virtual machine, multiple applications I'm running in background, it's slow. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce some wait time here. So I'll go back to this full name. And then here, before I execute, I'll say await page dot wait for timeout. And I'll just go ahead and give maybe 2 seconds as the timeout. Now let's rerun. I'll just run this one. Done. This time it passed. Any questions?
Did you just know that that was the problem because you knew that was the problem, or was there a way to tell from the page that that was the problem?
The thing is, it's a timeout issue that happened over here. That's why I knew that it failed, because it basically waits for it basically goes ahead and looks for that control and tries to access it. And if it is not available, it's gonna fail. So I introduced an explicit time here because of that.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So it was a timeout issue that was happening. It was failing because of that. And let me just comment this out, save it, go back and rerun it. So if you go to errors, see here, it's timing out. Are you
Okay.
able to see?
Yes.
So that's how I knew that since I have done this previously, actually I was working extensively with Playwright for automating the tests for our training projects. So I knew what was the problem. But if you want to know what is the problem, you can always go to errors and have a look at what is causing the problem. Like here, This is timing out and it's failing because of that. All right.
Okay.
So let's uncomment this and save it. And then we go back and run one more time and it should pass. There it is. It's passing. Now, this is one way of introducing a timeout. There are other ways as well. Like, for example, you can go ahead and wait for a label to appear on screen before you go ahead and do this assertion. So there are different strategies depending on what you're trying to achieve. We will have to use one of these strategies. Okay. Any questions?
No.
All right. So that's about Playwright. So let me minimize my screen. Now let's talk about artillery. Do you have some more time today to take a look at one more tool called as artillery?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Then, so Playwright is used for writing the automation tests. But let's say I want to do load testing of my fonts. Then I have two options. One, I can use Selenium along with JMeter. Whatever Playwright is doing, Selenium can also do that. And you can go ahead and use Selenium and JMeter for load testing. JMeter does not have support out of the box for running the load test for Playwright scripts. And then we have an external tool, another one called as Artillery, which can execute load tests which were written using Playwright as the script. It is an open source tool, so you can go ahead and use it without any licensing issues. Another thing is Artillery is based on JavaScript and TypeScript languages. So if you are creating your tests using JavaScript and TypeScript, you can load test them using Artillery. That's the reason when we are creating this Playwright scripts, we selected JavaScript as our platform rather than going with .NET, Python, and other platforms. Now, Artillery has multiple engines that you can use for different kinds of testing, and it has support for Playwright engine. And it can track the core web vitals and report those, like how much time it took to load the largest element on screen, or how much time it took for when user is interacting with controls. Let's say I'm interacting with a button, the next element is appearing on the screen. What is the time frame that took during those operations? The core web vitals, it's going to record and it's going to go ahead and report it to me. So Artillery is capable of doing that. It can launch tens and thousands of headless Chrome instances. It is specific for the Chrome browser. So you can go ahead and run your test with multiple Chrome instances. Headless over here means you can run it in background. So instead of browser appearing on screen, the browser will be running in background. Now, installing Artillery again is same as installing, excuse me, Playwright. So you go ahead and use the command npm install -g artillery @latest. I've already done that on my system here. So if I try to do it, it will basically tell me that it's already there. So let me just close this. I already have my required tests. I don't need CodeGen, so I can close this. Don't need this as well. So if I say npm install -g artillery @latest, It goes ahead and installs Artillery, the latest version of it. And we don't need multiple browsers here. Let's hit this finish, and then we'll get rid of the other one. That's going to take some time to complete installation of Artillery. Let's continue with our presentation while that is happening in background. Now, Artillery scripts are written in YAML. Are you familiar with YAML?
That is so familiar. I don't remember. Hold on. Let me see. No.
Okay. Are you familiar with the concept called as containers and Docker?
Containers? Yes. Dockers?
Okay.
No.
Okay. So when it comes to writing configuration of an application, initially we used to do it using XML. Then came JSON. Then afterwards, when DevOps tools came in, there were new configuration elements that came up, a new way of writing configuration that is called as YAML. So YAML, it's kind of similar to JSON. It's not same as JSON. It's similar to JSON. Just like in JSON, you go ahead and write the elements in key and value pair. You follow something similar in YAML. It's used for writing configurations. Like if you want to create a container using Docker, that configuration is again written using YAML. Many of the DevOps tools use YAML for their configuration. Artillery also uses YAML for its configurations. Again, YAML is basically text-based. You can create it using any text editor. Now, these are the things that you will add to the YAML script of Artillery. So we have something called as target, which is basically used to specify the base URL of your target test. So if I'm going to go ahead and test an application, so whatever application is under test, its URL, I can specify it to target. Then you have the next element called as phases. Phases is an element which can contain more than one element inside it. I can have multiple phases for my test. Each phase can contain 4 different keys. One, name, another, arrival count, next, ramp up, ramp 2, and duration. Name, it's basically the name of the phase. Arrival count, it's initial virtual users that you want to be created per second. So when the test starts, how many virtual users you want to create. And then ramp 2 basically specifies what could be the maximum number of users that you want for your test. So if I give arrival count as 1 and ramp 2 as 5, every 1 second, up to 5 users will be created. And then duration specifies the duration for that particular phase, how long that phase should last, like say 5 seconds, 10 seconds, you specify that. Any questions?
No.
Okay. Next, we have support for multiple engines to use in Artillery. Playwright is one such engine. So you need to specify what kind of load test you're doing. If you're doing it using Playwright, you have to specify the Playwright engine for it. Next, we have processor, where we specify the location of our scripts, where the scripts are present. We have to specify that to processor. Afterwards, we need to define scenarios. Phases is similar to thread group in JMeter, where you specify how many users you want to represent, what is the duration of your test, that you specify in a thread group. Similarly, you specify here in the phases. When it comes to JMeter, you have samplers, which actually represents the different test cases that you want to execute. Here, the scenarios represent that. So scenarios are similar to samplers. Each scenario can have 3 elements inside it, and you can have multiple scenarios. So name is nothing but the name of the scenario. Engine specifies which engine you want for that particular scenario. And if it is a Playwright script, you need to specify the name of the function. Like we have been creating functions, so we need to specify which function to execute. Here, lastly, to run the artillery script, you have the command artillery run, and then you specify the YAML file. Here is a sample script for you. So you can see there is config, that is the root element, and then you have target, then there is phases. So if you see this one, there are 2 phases. So there are 2 phases over here. This is phase 1. So each phase we indicated using this particular hyphen. Phases is something which can store a collection. When you have a collection, each element in the collection, you specify it using hyphen. So this is one element and this is another element of the collection. If I have a third phase, again, I will start it with a hyphen. So this phase says that the name is ramp up, arrival count is 5, that is 5 browsers or 5 users will be created per second, and it's going to last for 10 seconds. That's the duration. Then there is peak, where we start with minimum 5 users per second, but we can go up to 25 users per second. And the duration is 60 here. Next, we specify engines. So here we are saying engines that we want to use is Playwright, and then there is settings for the Playwright. So we want headless to be false. Next, you specify the processor, which is nothing but the location of your TypeScript file where the tests are present. And then you give multiple scenarios that you want to execute. So here I'm giving one scenario, test 1. And this scenario will use the Playwright engine. Again, you can have more than one engine. And the function that it will execute is homepage test. Then there is one more scenario called as test2. It's again using Playwright, but this time the function it's executing is contact page test. Any questions?
No.
All right. So now let's go ahead and use artillery. This is the process for using it. So whatever Playwright project that you have, in the test project, you will have to create one YAML file. And then we execute the load test. After executing the load test, you can generate some reports. So for reports, you need a JSON file. JMeter requires a CSV file for reports. Playwright requires a JSON file. So we say artillery run output JSON file name and the YAML file. And using that JSON file, we want to generate an HTML report. So we say artillery report using this JSON file. Any questions here? I'll demonstrate this.
Okay.
Okay. So let's go back to, let me just close this. Okay. So if we go back here to Visual Studio Code, here inside the test folder, I'm going to create my YAML file. Say load test.yml. This is my YAML file I'm creating. And first element that we're going to have here is config. And then inside config, we're going to go ahead and specify an element called as target. So the nested elements, TARGET, right? So the nesting is important. So I'm saying that target is nested inside config. So basically it's a sub element. And we can specify a target over here based on whatever base URL that you want to access. You can specify one target here. Here I can go ahead and specify maybe localhost if I want to test, say, decisions. And in case if I want to test something else, I can specify the base URL of that particular application. But that's not important that this base URL must be specified accurately. The reason for that is your test scripts will have this go-to statement. If you see there, the test scripts will have this go-to statement. So here I can go ahead and maybe give http://localhost, doesn't matter. Okay. Next, after target, we need to go ahead and specify the phases. What are the phases that we're going to have? So phases, 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 and then we will have multiple phases. So the name of a phase, colon, and then duration. Now this is important. Name, duration, and say arrival count and ramp 2. All three, actually all 4 of them should be on the same level. And if you want to have more than one phase, then you can just copy this and paste it like this. So that now I'm having 2 phases. So like this, you can create multiple phases based on what you want to do load testing for, right? Depending on the scenario, you can specify multiple phases over here. I'm going to go ahead and use just one phase. So let me remove this. And I'll say ramp 2 to 5, arrival count, say 1, duration, say 10, and I'll say a full name test. This is the name of my test I'm giving. Or I can say maybe peak. That's the peak count I'm going to have. Next, after that, we need to specify what is the engine that we want to use. So here I'm going to say engines, and then we specify we're going to use Playwright. And then if you want any configuration for the Playwright, we can specify the configuration like launch options. And here I'll say headless to false. So when I say headless to false, it's going to show me that application running in browser. If I set it to true, then the browser will not appear. It will run in background. Also, I want my results to be aggregated. So I can say aggregate results. I forgot this name actually. Let me check that. Just give me a moment.
Okay.
I believe I have one here. Open. No, not this one. Used it for the IST guys here. Okay, I'm using the wrong one. It's this folder. Test. Yeah, aggregate by name. Just wasn't sure about that. So that's a Playwright setting, aggregate by name to true. And now we can set up some scenarios. I'm gonna stop typing and take it from here, the rest of the things.
Okay.
Okay, so the one thing that you need to be aware of is this thing, the processor the engine, the phase, and the target. All of them should be on the same level of nesting, right?
Okay.
And then at the root level, you're going to have this config and scenario. These two should be on the same level of nesting. That's important. So the scenario name over here is full name test. It's using the Playwright engine. And now I need to specify here the function name. So function name in my case, this time is different. And the file is also different. So I'll just go ahead and change this. So the file here is this one, full name form test.ts. If you pay attention, both of them are present in the same folder. So here I can say /full name form test.ts. / basically indicates the current folder, and I'm saying there is a file called as this. Next, this file has a function called as name test. I want to use that function in my scenario. So I'll go ahead and say, use this function. Forgot to copy. Let's copy and go back and specify the function name. Again, you can specify multiple scenarios. I'm fine with one single scenario here. Any questions?
No.
All right. So let's go ahead and run this artillery test. In order to run this test, I have to do it from the same folder as where this file is present. So I'll go to my command prompt. And if I see here, I'm currently inside the project folder. That is this folder. I need to switch to this tests folder, right? So I'll just go ahead and say cd, say test folder. Now, if I do a dir, I should be able to see that file here. See, the file is there. Now let's go ahead and run. We'll say artillery run, and then we specify load test.yml. This basically runs the artillery test. See, multiple browser windows are opening, the test is executing. Okay, now I have my test results. So I can see the session length of these tests. This is the minimum, maximum, average, and the mean, as well as 95% and 99 percentile of my session duration. All of it is being reported here by artillery. Now it also gives me certain core web vitals that I told you about. Like if you see here, there is something called as FCP. So FCP stands for First Contentful Paint. It basically measures the time from start of the page load to when any part of the page content is rendered on screen. So again, it's going to give me minimum, maximum, median, and 95, 99 percentile of the particular time. Then we also have something called as FID. FID stands for First Input Display. This basically measures the first user interaction, like clicking a button, right? So it's going to go ahead and measure that, how much time it took for a button or a control to be available for user interaction. Then there is largest contentful paint. That's the name. Okay. Largest contentful paint. That basically tells me how much time it took for the largest object of the page to render on screen. So I can also give you a link for these elements in case if you want to go ahead and have a look at these elements more in detail. I can provide you that. We also have two more elements here. That is interaction to next paint, that is INP. That basically uh, tells us how the user experience is when it comes to your web application, whether the user interface is responsive or not. That's going to be indicated by this metric. And then lastly, we have time to first byte, which basically tells us the first byte of the response that was received after a request was made. So all of this is going to be reported by Artillery. It also gives me the browser codes, like how many browser uh, HTTP status codes were received, like 225, 200 status codes were received, 5 were 302. How many users, the virtual users that we mentioned, completed the test, how many were created, how many were created by this particular test, how many failed, and the total duration of my session length. Any questions?
No.
Okay. Now this is the console data. Let's say I want this particular data to appear in say a report. So I need to first go ahead and generate one JSON file. And once I generate the JSON file, then I can go ahead and say uh, create a dashboard out of it. So let's create a JSON file. We'll say artillery run hyphen output, say result.json. This is again, okay, one hyphen, I gave two, I believe. That's it saying. Yeah, I forgot the YAML file. What was the file name? Load test.yml. Artillery run. Yeah, two hyphens was there. Yes, it's running. Okay, so the report is generated. The file name is result.json, and now I can create a dashboard. So artillery report and then result.json. Hit enter. Now this is something which was now deprecated, and soon artillery may stop this particular feature for reporting. Now, for now, we have the report, so I can just go and look for that report here. It's an HTML report. Whatever we have seen previously in that JSON format, it's now available to us as a nicely formatted dashboard. So time to first byte, the browser codes, the failures, the total virtual users, the users created in total, and the users created for this specific test, the failed users, the session length, all of this information is reported here. Okay. Any questions?
No.
All right. So one last slide I have, and we will wrap this particular session. Let me just go ahead and open that, and my battery is also running low. Just give me a moment. My laptop may shut down.
Okay.
Okay, you still with me?
Yes.
All right. So let me reshare my screen then. Screen share is already there, I believe. Just need to share my slide. Okay, now let's talk about the test environment setup. So we need the test environment to be as identical as possible to production. For example, on my production, let's say I'm having an app server and database server as two different servers, then my test environment should also have app server and database server as two different servers. Also, their configuration should match. So I cannot have a test server with 2 GB of RAM and a production server with 8 GB of RAM, because my test results will basically not give me the accurate uh, information on how the application will behave in production. So this is important. Now, the test environment setup basically contains doing three things. One is setting up test servers. So we need the hardware for the servers, like virtual machines needs to be set up. If it is decisions hosted, then IT ops can create these VMs for us. If it is client hosted, then client will have to set up those servers for us. Then we also need to install the required software dependencies. Like for running decisions, we need .NET and we need a database. So all of these things should be installed, and decisions application should also be installed on the test server. We also need monitoring and measurement tools, like we should install Datadog agent on the application server as well as the database server to monitor the resource utilization. And in case if we want to see any CPU spikes and or memory spikes that are happening, then we should also install .trace and .memory. Lastly, we require the test data, and this data should be as much realistic as possible so that we can simulate it in our load test. And this data should be provided by our customers. The customers should provide this data. And in case if customer is not providing, maybe we can use tools like ChatGPT to generate this load test data. Also, for running your tests, you should also have a separate virtual machine setup for running the test. It should not be done from your local system, because again, on your local system, there might be a lot of other applications running, consuming the resources. So the calculations which were done by tools like JMeter and Artillery might get impacted based on available resources. A few days back, there was a customer who was trying to do load testing using the dev server, and then we recommended that it should not be done. Any questions related to the test environment setup?
No.
All right. So this is the last topic for module 2. This was the lengthiest module. And next week, we will start with an application that I have. I want you to do load testing. I want you to do create Playwright scripts for testing it. I will help you out when you're getting stuck with it. You will have to fix the errors in that application. Okay. So that's what we will have for the next week. Monday, we won't be having a session. There is Eid holiday here in Hyderabad, but Tuesday we'll be having a session.
Okay.
Yeah. So before we close off, do you have any questions or anything that you want to ask?
I don't think so.
All right. And in that case, I'll stop my screen share and stop the recording, and I'll let